Hi, and welcome to the PropsClear podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Angeline, where we'll be talking all about how to improve public perception surrounding drones. We'll also talk about the regulations impacting the industry right now. This is, of course, for informational and entertainment purposes, so none of this constitutes legal advice. So fasten your seatbelts and let's get going. Today's guest is Anthony Loperfido. He's a sergeant at the Miami Beach Police Department. They're working on starting a drone as a first responder program, but we want to first talk about what got you interested in drones to begin with. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Hi, Jillian. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight. So, it's funny that at the time, my police chief came to me and said, he goes, Tony, we've got our army, which is our group of guys that are out on the street and gals that are out there, um, the frontline law enforcement officers from the Miami Beach Police Department. That's our army. He goes, we have, our Marines, they're out there, we have our Marine Patrol unit, they're our you know, protecting our coastline and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, but we don't have an Air Force. He goes, we need an Air Force. He said, we need
Mm.
drones. And the commissioner at the time, our elected officials were quite supportive of drone technology. And they said, listen, let's really start to pursue starting a drone program. So it was a hallway conversation that turned into a pretty aggressive, in a great way, program for the agency. So
When was the first time you got to see one in action?
we were actually the Miami Beach Police Department. We had put together a training scenario, which was a reenactment of the tragic events that took place with the Pulse nightclub shooting. Um,
Mm.
it's funny, as we're sitting here on this podcast, I'm in Orlando, Florida, at a conference, not too far away from where the Pulse nightclub shooting took place. Um,
Mhm.
and a gentleman was there who had a public safety drone company, and he was providing us just aerial imagery um, and live streaming of the training exercise, which was taking place at a nightclub directly across the street from our police headquarters. And this gentleman and we ran into each other during this training exercise, and I was just, I've always been into technology and always had a passion for aviation. So we just got into some, real just sidewalk conversation. Hey, show me what you're doing. Show me the aircraft. Show me, talk to me about how you're helping us. Um, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the technology. And I thought there are some really amazing things we can do in law enforcement using drones. So from that point on, I knew this was something that was going to help at least our agency succeed. We're an island community. We're a barrier island, 3 ways in, 3 ways out, 7 square miles. And I said, this is a perfect place to use drones. We're not a major, county. We're a small island. I said, this is going to be the perfect opportunity for us to leverage that technology.
When I first met you at the Commercial UAV Expo, I believe you had mentioned Surfside as well. Tell me about what you remember about, the drone use during something like that with the collapse of that building.
So, yeah, that was one of the most, in a law enforcement officer's career, there's many things that you carry, but there's certain things that you'll never ever forget. And the month that I spent um, at the Surfside um, building collapse is something that will never ever I'll never be able to get those very vivid memories, um, and, and the smell and the emotions was something that will never go away. Shortly after the building collapsed, I received a phone call from my boss at the time. He said, "Listen, get out here. We need to set up a command post." And I remember asking him, "Is it as bad as it seems?" And he said, "It's the worst thing he's ever seen in his life." So I remember it was just after 1 o'clock in the morning. I threw a uniform on and raced to the scene in our mobile command vehicle to start setting up an incident uh, command post for our personnel. And
Mhm.
shortly after we were situated there, I noticed the fire department from other agencies. There was every police and fire agency that you could think of in the county was there, even the adjoining counties. And I noticed
Mhm.
some of them struggling with trying to get their drones set up and organized and all that. And I went
Mhm.
over and I helped. Um, and I said, listen, I'm very familiar with drones. Let me help you get situated. Um, right there, I assumed the role as the air boss for that incident, um, managing all of the air assets. One of the biggest issues that we had shortly after the building collapse is were the media helicopters that were trying to get in as tight as they could in order to capture the
Mhm.
imagery for the news. Um, and unfortunately, and we have a great working relationship with the media, it was interfering with the
Mhm.
rescuers being able to hear people and calling out to them when they were looking for survivors.
Mhm.
So clearing that airspace was kind of my main priority at the onset. Was getting the helicopters away just far enough that they could capture their shot, but it would allow both the drone operators to get in and monitor the personnel, the urban search and rescue teams that were in the pile, and also the fire personnel that were going in trying to get survivors and rescue them. So clearing out that airspace, helping the folks that were showing up on the scene with drones, and making sure that our first responders out there had any resources they need.
When we're talking about improving the public perception surrounding drones, drones are so important in a situation like that where something's collapsed and the structure may still be compromised. I remember drones were being used even in New York City during the parking deck collapse just, a few months ago. So to be able to save the lives and protect the lives of law enforcement and first responders, drones can go in and try and help people that may be trapped in that area, correct?
1,000%. So there's this misconception that law enforcement are using drones to spy on people and watch people and and play the role as Big Brother, and that's not the case at all. What we've done as an agency is get out in front of the public with our drones. Our drones are not a secret. We use drones, but we're using drones for good. We're using drones to when there is a bad guy running behind your house within a police
Mhm.
perimeter, you know, we're going to put that drone up there so we can apprehend him and we can get him away and keep you safe. Um, we use our drones for traffic crash scene mapping. Again, I mentioned earlier, we're an island. We've got three ways in and three ways out. So
Mhm.
when one of those causeways gets shut down due to a car crash, or God forbid, a fatal crash, those roads are shut down for hours. So getting out there and being able to take measurements and the photographs in 20 minutes as opposed to 5, 6, 7 hours is it's a huge advantage for everybody who lives there. It's getting the roads open for our residents and for our tourists. But my recommendation to any agency, whether any
Mhm.
public safety agency, whether it be police or fire,
Mhm.
get out there, and show your drones off to the public. Every time we have an open house or a community event, the drones are there. It's nothing
Mhm.
secret, and we're not, we can't see through windows, we can't see through walls with the drones. Um, we like to educate as much as we can with that.
That is one other thing that I believe it was either your discussion and panel or one of the other public safety panels. It was mentioned that while the body cams are turned off of the pilots who are flying those drones in some of those police departments that are using the DFR programs, and they're not recording the entire flight. They're only recording a part of the flight, so that is a good, and that's a good way to help calm the public down and be like, look, this is what we're doing to protect your privacy and to make sure that we don't catch anything that is nefarious beyond us just trying to catch the bad guy, or make sure that, I think one of the examples was that they thought something was a gun, and in fact it was like, something that was tied with an airsoft, or it was tied with something else that was not. Once they were able to get that aerial confirmation, it de-escalated the situation quite a bit.
No, yeah, and that was a great win for that agency. Our policy is our body worn cameras are used all the time. They're recording whenever we're on a scene of a call. Um,
Mhm,
our policy is also that our drones, if it's in the air outside of a training flight, we're recording. Again,
mhm.
full transparency. Whatever's allowed to be shared via public records request, we do that. But we do a phenomenal job in making sure that we can maintain um, individuals' privacy. So, if our body worn camera were to capture imagery from the controller um,
Mhm.
of any type of private property, stuff that's privileged and not that is protected and would not be public record, we would redact that. We do a phenomenal job. We have a whole team of folks that all they do is redactions of our body worn cameras, um, and we obviously protect all of our drone video as well.
And I think someone had mentioned that, there are special servers you can put it into, that those recorded videos into. There's certain, cybersecurity measures that are taken in order to make sure that that video cannot be hacked or anything along those lines.
Well, we use Axon. Many
Mhm.
agencies are using Axon. That's where our body worn camera video is stored, and that's where our drone video is stored as well. So very
Mhm.
protected. They're the leader in the industry. I mean, a tech leader, all over the world. So they've really set the standard when it comes to privacy and redaction and that type of technology. So we're great partners with them.
Now, confirm with me, is the DFR program in place in Miami Beach just yet, or is it still getting underway?
It is not in place yet. It's definitely on the roadmap. There's a couple legal hurdles that we have to get through in order to get that done.
Mhm,
Identifying structures where we want to keep, um, you know, the drone nest, the rooftop
mhm,
area, and the other thing is also in order if you're gonna start a program like that, you have to have the personnel to do it. We're a very, very busy city. So to take folks away from patrolling the streets, it's hard to justify that. Even though we will definitely get there, we just
mhm.
don't have the manpower to sacrifice that today. But we will get there. We're absolutely going to get there. But we are taking, we are doing the crawl, walk, run to establish our DFR program. We've got relationships, phenomenal relationships with the FAA,
Mhm.
the local FISDO out of Miramar, Florida, not too far from Miami Beach. They're aware that we want to start this program, and we know that we have their support. So we're looking forward to it for sure.
I was thinking that visibility, you have an advantage for visibility for something like that. And now let's talk about what kinds of things are necessary in order to start a DFR program. One of the things that you mentioned and that I heard in the past is all about a rooftop. Basically, there's a giant helipad like you would see on, a hospital roof or something like that. But it looks like that for a drone. And that's where the launching points are. The launching points are not on the street level. So it's not going to be going, because I know Miami Beach has a lot of high rises, so it's not going to be flying up, past all these windows of the high rises, from the street level. This is going to automatically be launched directly from a rooftop. And it seems like, places like Chula Vista and other California entities and law enforcement departments have been doing something similar.
So our police headquarters is right in the center of South Beach, right in the heart of South Beach. So obviously that's going to be a good place for us. That's where all the action happens. That's where the vast majority of our calls for service take place, both on the police and fire side. So we figured the roof of our police headquarters would contain what's called a drone nest, which is a pretty high tech enclosure. The company that we work with is local to Miami also, or that we plan to work with, that not only provides a secure location for the drone, but it also swaps the batteries for the drone, which is pretty cool. A lot of the other drone nests that are on the market, yeah, your drone will come in, it'll land, and it'll charge, but
Mhm.
it's about keeping that aircraft in the air as long as you need it. So as the battery runs itself down, it knows to come back to the nest. Nest opens up, drone lands, swaps the battery, and you're back up in the air within 2 or 3 minutes. So it's a pretty revolutionary, it's pretty techy and pretty cool piece of technology. But as far as the different pieces that of the puzzle, so obviously you have your drone nest, which we just talked about, choosing an ideal location.
Can you define what a nest? Can you define what a nest? My goal, as I said, is improving public perception and information. What exactly do you mean by nest?
I wish I had a way to show you a picture of it, but think of a bird's nest in a tree. The building being the tree, and the nest being what houses the drone. It's a pretty cool, techie looking enclosure that
Mhm.
it's a big box, if you will. Box opens up, drone slides out, and based on commands that are given to the drone, either by the pilot that's there at the rooftop, or if you're using true beyond visual line of sight, um, flight and all of the regulations that go into that, the pilot of that drone could be anywhere in the world as long as they have access to that secured network. And drone comes out of that enclosure, takes off, and flies to that call or that incident.
What kinds of situations would that drone be, deployed for?
Well, our drones will never be used just to randomly patrol areas. We don't do that. We going back to the whole, you know, public perception. We're not using any of our robotic technology to patrol and watch people. Um, we will use drones for disturbance calls, intoxicated persons fighting in our public parks or on our beach. Um, we do get the spring breakers who sometimes don't come down and enjoy themselves the way they should. Um, and those type of disturbance calls, we will send a drone out. One to direct our officers into those large crowds, to protect the officers, to provide overwatch of our officers as they go into these large crowds, and to quickly identify the persons that are taking what should be a beautiful beach day and making it bad for the people that are just there to have a good time. So we can get those folks away and try to quell that situation. Um, we have great relationships with our fire department. Um, Whenever our fire personnel, if they have a building fire, vehicle fire, traffic crash scene, all of those type of incidents, are the drone could be used for sure.
I know this is definitely something that number of the Florida departments have been talking about, but a new law earlier this year, I believe it was in April, basically said that none of the law enforcement agencies or government agencies in a state like Florida, and I think some of the states are starting to follow suit, cannot use drones that are made by a country that there's a bit of a foreign concern about. I think there's some crazy statistic I heard at the conference about 87% of drones out there used by companies are DJI. And that's, something to think about because DJI is considered a Chinese product, a product from China. So, what kind of hurdles has that caused, and has that delayed a lot of the Florida, law enforcement divisions from, finding solutions? I know the price points are definitely a concern for many.
No, for sure. So yeah, Florida State Statute 934.50 stipulates that the critical components of the aircraft cannot be manufactured in a foreign country of concern. And yes, Miami Beach Police Department, we use DJI since 2000. end of 2014, 2015. Um, they have the market share at 87% of the consumer drones that are out there. It posed some real challenges for us, having to shelve all of that equipment to stick it in a closet until we can find some other purpose or use for it or donate it. It was very frustrating. The American made drones, far more expensive, a lot more expensive. That's been a hurdle. Identifying funding, um, but we were very fortunate because our elected officials and the executive level um, leadership of our organization identified funding, and we were able to replace our aircraft very quickly. A lot of agencies in the state of Florida have not. There's
Yeah.
many police agencies that had thriving drone programs who right now they can't do anything because they can't meet the requirement of the law. So it's been very frustrating for a lot of folks in the industry. It's just one of those things that we've had to contend with.
So there's a lot of challenges. You got the staffing challenges, you've got, that new law, you've got technology issues, you've got, where am I going to put this program? But it seems like overall it's a force multiplier for a place like Miami Beach, correct?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Having a bird's eye view, that type of perspective, has proven itself to be a force multiplier, 100 times over. Whenever our tactical units are responding to a situation, or if it's a search warrant, and just being able to provide overwatch to protect our personnel and to protect the public, it's been a game changer since day one. And we absolutely love when folks who maybe are not familiar with what the police are doing with drones, and they stop and they ask questions, and they want to look, and they want to stand over your shoulder and look to see what can the drone actually see. It's pretty satisfying being able to bridge that gap between the public and law enforcement, but also provide, like you had mentioned, that force multiplier using a pretty simple piece of technology, really.
And there are a lot of safety features in so many of these drones that allow it to do a lot of the, I guess AI is a big part, autonomy is a big part of a lot of these drones.
They're flying computers. You know,
Mhm.
um, the the autonomy and the software that's built into them, the safety net, if you will, that keeps them in the air safely. We do everything that we can to avoid, putting the public, both persons and property, in harm's way. We don't ever want to have to knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, but our drone just fell out of the sky and landed on your Rolls Royce." We don't want to ever have that conversation with somebody.
No.
So we try, and we during our training we teach our pilots, stay away from private property, stay away from the public's right of
Mhm.
way and all that kind of stuff. And if you have to fly down a roadway, is there an alleyway that you can fly down? Is there an easement between houses that you can fly down, as opposed to you know through somebody's front yard or across a sidewalk? So, but the technology, the software that's built into the drones now is just absolutely amazing.
Well, that's really good to hear. My last line of questioning is all about where you see drones in the next like 5 to 10 years.
I don't know if I ever want to. I don't. I know I don't want to be on a test flight in a drone, um, as a commuter. But at some point I would like to be able to do it. I know we've had some conversations, as a city, private companies who would like to start a private public partnership to provide air transit, just like the Uber of the sky, right? Moving folks from the airport to our convention center. I think we'll see that in the next 5 or 10 years. I think that'll be quite common. Um, I think that we'll start seeing a lot more delivery stuff. I know that there are some private companies who would like to see that, pardon the pun again, but take off, if you will. Um, I'd like to see some of the medical stuff, the medical delivery, um, to rural areas really take off as well. I think that would be a huge advantage. I know there's countries that have already started that, like Zipline,
Hmm.
which is just fascinating to me. Um, you know, it, it's one of those things. If you can imagine it, it'll probably end up happening. It'll be there in our lifetime.
Now, if no one someone doesn't know what zipline does, they basically fly medical supplies with drones around certain countries in Africa. Here in the U.S., regulations are going to have to follow suit, and like like I said earlier, reality versus what people want to see. I think regulations are going to be the biggest part of that hurdle. Correct?
Absolutely, but yes, y- solutions like Zipline have absolutely changed, healthcare and the level of the quality of life for those folks. Things that were unobtainable before, um, just simple things that we take for granted,
Mhm.
has been a complete, game changer for them. So, no, absolutely amazing. On the state side, we'll see what the regulations bring and what they allow for.
That's going to be the hardest part. Well, thanks so much for
Absolutely.
talking with me, Tony. I really appreciate it. Be sure to follow PropsClear wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have any topics or suggestions for the show, any guests you'd like to hear on this show, feel free to email me at angelswings.jillian@gmail.com.